Bitchy little dogs don't even phase my basic policy to bomb smarter. My Ronald Reagan's crush Carter with band-pick tactics making young men into martyrs. Come to my happy promised land, smiley face opportunity cipher and jump on a cold flow pension plan. A proletarian crushing state of the union between serpentine words and mass confusion of media control, blur, advertising, disillusionment. Your family will love my low rent, low life, no brain, reality dagger movement. Hop over the border for amusement. Try to test the waters at the other slaughter crews bailed. You up again, Jesus freaks, forming corporations and young Republicans. Indelible NATO force hitting agenda pumping governments. I'm loving it. Keep the people guessing who I'm running with. Control the population and hide behind sacred covenant. Fucking with me, please. Local wildlife burning gasoline seeds. Standing on a magnetic third world planet with metal plates in the knees. Can't you hear the disenchanted hollow scream of Gabriel's reflected new wind instrument, a judgment plate and flat sea? I replace humans like robots in a GM factory. Then export metaphors to sweatshops because the price is satisfactory. Compliance with the cries of injustice get met with apathy. So cloak, hormone injected dairy products and conservative right-wing anti-eroticism. The poisonous reservoirs and power lines in the neighborhood cause botulism. Senseless, join the census. Censorship, sentences, sentence. Triple felon citizen, paid penance. Dissension against CF ensign. Penitentiary residents. Lock them up first and ask questions. Omniscient presence, my charm is the weapon. With cameras, mics, and satellites to leave privacy breathless. You don't even know the chemicals you've ingested. Urine tested, beat innocent man till he confesses.
Who's America? Who's America? Who's America? Who's America?
I'm America. I'm America. I'm America. Mr. Man, get busy on him. I'm America arrogant, terminus verbal curfew murders. You either purchase my products or you're worthless. That's my service. Don't look into the oculars of a daylight saver. Eraser city-headed monument defacer comprising of patriot droids sent into the void with lead linings. Employed by the bureaucrats of automatic twisted rhyme timing. You're guaranteed nothing but my fat little finger that lingers 1 inch off of the big button. Let's start this. I'm sarin gas, hide in your apartments. I'm stealth like a robot hidden in a fat asshole apartment. To give a prickly fuck like sand shark skin condoms to your parent vaginal problem. The hottest shit off sound. I'm America until infinite gestures measured to the pesticide symmetry. Invite you to cross the border, then shit on your divinity. What language is that? I'm anguish and fat, tangled with a star-spangled standard issue gap for crowd management. Talk loud and get enshrouded in a hot cloud of harassment by the proud force of my mental pedestrian checkers that smash and subordinate skulls and update the filing your dental records. You trying to get elected, but the crowd is my paid helpless. You just stepped into the spectrum of paranoid word rainbow, thinking you sick with a silhouette, burn transit cop on his plane. I'm America. This is where the pain grows like poppies in the field of dreams I paid for. I'll burn it down if operated sloppily. Copy my economic sanction rhyme style. Got your syllables scraping for rice and writing in the pre-1960 jalopy. My favorite flavor of gas is mustard. I'm fucking a blind hermaphrodite icon and convincing you that it's justice.
Who's America? 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 Who's America?
Treason will not be tolerated. You have been enlisted into a lifestyle that you may not change. Understand, you can be happy and smile for the cameras, motherfuckers.
Hello, you are tuned into River West Radio. I'm your host, Cassius King, and tonight is the Recall Walker edition, reminding you to vote this June 5th in roughly a week. Tonight's show will be a little bit more politically focused than it usually is. I will start with a reading from the Shepherd Express. A recent edition, which is covering the John Doe investigation on Walker's administration. Will Scott Walker beat John Doe? Voters may go to the polls with incomplete information about his role in alleged misconduct, by Lisa Kaiser. With just 2 weeks before the June 5th recall election facing Republican Governor Scott Walker, the embattled governor may be running out the ticking clock on the John Doe investigation into alleged misconduct of the Milwaukee County aides and others. The sprawling investigation began in the spring of 2010, then heated up publicly, at least when the FBI raided the home of Walker's former top aide at the county, Cynthia Archer, in September 11, 2011. Since then, 4 Walker associates have been charged with crimes that include embezzlement, child enticement, and misconduct in office. In addition, a major Walker donor, railroad executive William Gardner, pleaded guilty to campaign finance offenses, and a county aide, Darlene Wink, pleaded guilty to misdemeanors in exchange for providing information to prosecutors. Will any more charges be issued before the recall? The Milwaukee County District Attorney's Office will not comment on its John Doe investigation. Walker's defense attorneys, Michael Steinle and John Gaio, did not return the Shepherd's phone calls. The legal experts and political operatives spoke to the Shepherd about the 2-year-long investigation, who and what Milwaukee County District Attorney John Chisholm and his team may be targeting, and the political ramifications of the John Doe and the recall. What's Walker's role? So is Walker involved in the alleged misconduct that took place within his county executive office in 2010? Or is Walker merely an innocent bystander who knew nothing about the 1,000 emails that prosecutors say were exchanged between his top campaign staffers and his county aide, Kelly Rindfleisch? During county work hours, the private internet system apparently set up by Walker's then Deputy Chief of Staff, Tim Russell, for county insiders, and the Walker campaign fundraisers set up by another county aide, Darlene Wink, while she was being paid by taxpayers? The answer is a bit of a mystery, at least until Chisholm and the John Doe judge, Neil Nettesheim, make another public move. And unless Chisholm releases new criminal complaints or additional information about the investigation before June 5th, voters in the recall election will head to the polls with an incomplete picture of what exactly transpired while Walker was county executive and campaigning for governor. Walker has spent at least $60,000 on top-flight criminal defense attorneys representing him in this investigation, set up a criminal defense fund, and has said he was cooperating with Chisholm, who had requested a meeting a few months ago. Walker hasn't said if he has met with Chisholm or whether he has dragged his feet in order to push the conversation into June or later, after the recall election has been held. That leads Walker's opponents to envision a nightmare scenario in which Walker survives the June recall election because voters are not fully informed of his role, if any, in the alleged crimes, but then is dragged down by the John Doe later this year. A Walker resignation would allow Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Kleefisch to become governor and serve out Walker's 4-year term, if she survives her recall election as well. Experts who spoke to the Shepherd said that Chisholm still has time to issue complaints before the June 5th recall. After all, then District Attorney E. Michael McCann filed charges against legislative leaders in the Caucasus scandal a mere 2 weeks before the November 2002 general election. What do we know? Felony charges and immunity from prosecution. John Doe investigations are highly secretive. The public knows that there is, in fact, a John Doe. The public knows who has been granted immunity from prosecution. Resulting criminal complaints are made public as well and often include clues about where the investigation is headed. While Walker allies have complained that the John Doe investigations are providing leaks to the media, highly respected criminal justice officials pushed back on that theory last week. In a sharply worded open letter to the public, McCann, former Supreme Court Justice Janine Geske, former Kenosha County District Attorney Robert Jamboy, and others wrote, "There is no evidence that anyone associated with the prosecutorial, investigative, and judicial functions of this John Doe inquiry have violated the secrecy order in that inquiry or otherwise acted contrary to law or good conscience." In this John Doe, we know that a dozen people have been given immunity. They include Walker's gubernatorial spokesman, Cullen Wherry, who ran Brett Davis's campaign for lieutenant governor in 2010 before joining Walker's campaign. When Davis didn't survive the primary, Wherry was mentioned in the criminal complaint filed against Kelly Rindfleisch, a top Walker aide at the county, who at the same time was a paid fundraiser for the Davis campaign. Rindfleisch emailed a friend in 2010, "Half of what I'm doing is policy for the campaign. She is facing 4 felony counts of misconduct in office for her work for the Davis campaign, well on the county dime." Prosecutors say Rindfleisch and Wherry exchanged numerous emails about fundraising during Rindfleisch's county work hours on a private internet network allegedly set up in the county executive's office suite by Walker's close county and campaign aide, Tim Russell, who faces felony charges for allegedly embezzling more than $20,000 from a charity for veterans. Russell also turns up in the criminal complaint of his partner, Brian Pierrick, who is alleged to have attempted to solicit a 17-year-old Waukesha boy for sex. Immunity was also granted to Rose Ann Dieck, a local Republican fundraiser, and to David Halbrooks, a Milwaukee attorney and a Democrat. Halbrooks' involvement seems to be a head-scratcher to many watching the investigations play out, since he didn't work for Walker's campaign or for the county. In addition to this core of insiders, a handful of people in the railroad industry were granted immunity as part of the case against Gardner, and Walker's county aide, Darlene Wink, pleaded guilty to misdemeanors in exchange for her cooperation into alleged destruction of evidence by the Walker administration. Her sentencing date has been pushed off into the future. Kevin Kavanaugh also faces criminal charges for allegedly embezzling money from a veterans organization. Unresolved issues. More clues about the John Doe investigation have appeared in the media but haven't been resolved. Top Walker aide Cindy Archer's home was raided by the FBI in the summer of 2011, and her computers were seized. Nothing in the public record indicates Archer's involvement in the alleged misconduct. According to prosecutors, Rindfleisch exchanged more than 1,000 emails with top Walker campaign operatives, including his campaign manager, Keith Gilkes, deputy manager, Stephen Thompson, and spokeswoman, Jill Bader. The investigators have the emails, yet didn't publish transcripts of them in Rindfleisch's criminal complaint, unlike the emails exchanged between Rindfleisch and the Davis campaign. What's the content of these emails? Did Rindfleisch exchange emails with Walker? Was he copied on any of them? If so, then prosecutors could allege that Walker knew that his county staffer was campaigning on the taxpayer's dime, a chargeable offense. This week, Walker told a reporter that Rindfleisch did what she was expected to do. In addition, prosecutors released a May 2010 email from Walker to Tim Russell, then working at the county's housing director, telling Russell that campaigning on county time needed to stop. Another source of puzzlement is the link between Walker and questionable contracts for office space for county workers. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel ran a highly detailed article in January about allegations of bid rigging in 2005 and 2010, and the involvement of Walker's then campaign treasurer, John Hiller, and a lobbying firm created by Walker's periodic campaign and county aide, Jim Villa. Yet none of these allegations has materialized in any of the publicity released John Doe documents. The Criminal Defense Fund, not disclosed by Chisholm's office, but made public by Walker himself, is existence of the loftily named Scott Walker Trust. Put more plainly, it's his Criminal Defense Fund. We know that Walker transferred money into his fund from his campaign account, and while Walker is supposed to obtain the permission of his donors to transfer money into his legal defense fund, he doesn't have to get the permission in writing, nor does he have to submit anything to the Government Accountability Board. All Walker had to show on his campaign finance statement was a lump sum transfer to that account. He didn't need to itemize which contributors were transferred. The GAB can only release general information about the establishment of legal defense funds and cannot comment on any contact it has had with the Walker campaign. Walker's opponent in the recall, Milwaukee Mayor Tom Barrett, has been pushing the government to disclose why he set up his legal defense fund. Walker hasn't said a word. But the reasons for setting up such a fund are very limited. The targeted official or his agent must be under investigation, being charged with or convicted of violations of campaign finance laws or prohibited election practices. According to a May 18th letter from GAB staff, Counsel Michael Haas to Senator John Erpenbach, Democrat from Middleton, the campaign statutes cover contribution limits, registration and reporting requirements, election threats, election bribery, and election fraud. So the existence of Walker's Legal Defense Fund confirms a few things: that Walker or one of his agents is either under investigation or being charged or has been charged with crimes related to campaign and elections. That has been an article from the Shepherd Express from the May 24th to May 30th, 2012 edition. For more information, please read it yourself. Thank you.
I'm sorry. My good friend, let me learn it properly from my guru, then I will teach you.
Learning consists in daily accumulating. The practice of Tao consists in daily diminishing. Keep on diminishing and diminishing until you reach the state of non-ado. Non-ado and yet nothing left is undone. To win the world, one must renounce all. If one still has private ends to serve, one will never be able to win the world. That is chapter 48 of the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu.
But we mainly reviewed War Horse and Tintin because they came out like 4 days apart or something like that.
Oh, okay.
And,
Tonight's recipe
but I still wanted to
is cauliflower maranka. The ingredients that you'll need are 1 pound mushrooms sliced. Saute in butter with juice of 1 lemon. As well, 1 large onion chopped. 1 large head cauliflower in flour pieces. Saute that with 3 cloves of crushed garlic, basil, salt, and pepper. 3 cups cooked brown rice or millet, salted and buttered. 2½ cups grated cheese of your choice. Combine everything. Bake covered half an hour at 350 degrees. And you'll have cauliflower maranka. Prepares 5 to 6 servings. That has been a recipe from the Moosewood Cookbook by Molly Katzen. Continuing from where we left off, in Manufacturing Consent, The Political Economy of the Mass Media, by Edward S. Herman and Noam Chomsky.
What's that? It's kind of cool. Did you see War Horse? Because visually it's really...
One important reason for this was the rise in scale of newspaper enterprise and the associated increase in capital costs from the mid-19th century onward, which was based on technological improvements along with the owner's increased stress on reaching large audiences. The expansion of the free market was accompanied by an industrialization of the press. The total cost of establishing a national weekly on a profitable basis in 1837 was under £1,000, with a break-even circulation of 6,200 copies. By 1867, the estimated startup cost of a new London daily was £50,000. The Sunday Express, launched in 1918, spent over £2 million before it broke even, with a circulation of over 250,000. Similar processes were at work in the United States, where the startup cost of a newspaper in New York City in 1851 was $69,000. The public scale of the St. Louis Democrat in 1872 yielded $456,000. And city newspapers were selling at from $6 to $18 million in the 1920s. The cost of machinery alone, of even very small newspapers, has for many decades run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. In 1945, it could be said that even small newspaper publishing is big business, and is no longer a trade one takes up lightly, even if he has substantial cash, or takes up at all if he doesn't. Thus, the first filter, the limitation on ownership of media with any substantial outreach by the requisite large size of investment, was applicable a century or more ago, and it has become increasingly effective over time. In 1986, there were some 1,500 daily newspapers, 11,000 magazines, 9,000 radio, and 1,500 TV stations, 2,400 book publishers, and 7 movie studios in the United States, over 25,000 media entities in all. But a large proportion of those among this set who were news dispensers were very small and local, dependent on large national companies and wire services for all but local news. Many more were subject to common ownership, sometimes extending through virtually the entire set of media variants. Ben Bagdikian stresses the fact that despite the large media numbers, the 29 largest media systems account for over half of the output of newspapers, and most of the sales and audiences in magazines, broadcasting, books, and movies. He contends that these constitute a new private ministry of information and culture that can set the national agenda. Actually, while suggesting a media autonomy from corporate and government power that we believe to be incompatible with structural facts, as we describe below, Bagdikian also may be understating the degree of effective concentration in news manufacture. It has long been noted that the media are tiered, with the top tier as measured by prestige, resources, and outreach, comprising somewhere between 10 and 24 systems. It is this top tier, along with the government and wire services, that defines the news agenda and supplies much of the national and international news to the lower tiers of the media. And thus, for the general public, centralization within the top tier was substantially increased by the post-World War II rise of television and the national networking of this important medium. Pre-television news, markets were local, even if heavily dependent on the higher tiers and a narrow set of sources for national and international news. The networks provide national and international news for 3 national sources, and television is now the principal source of news for the public. The maturing of cable, however, has resulted in a fragmentation of television audiences and a slow erosion of the market share and power of the networks. Table 1-1 provides some basic financial data for the 24 media giants, or their controlling parent companies, that make up the top tier of media companies in the United States. This compilation includes 1. The 3 television networks, ABC through its parent Capital Cities, CBS and NBC through its ultimate parent, General Electric. 2. The leading newspaper empires, New York Times, Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, the Times Mirror, Wall Street Journal, Dow Jones, Knight Ridder, Gannett, Hearst, Scripps Howard, Newhouse, Advanced Publications, and the Tribune Company. 3. The major news and general interest magazines, Time, Newsweek, subsumed under the Washington Post, Reader's Digest, TV Guide, Triangle, and U.S. News and World Report. 4. A major book publisher, McGraw-Hill, and 5. Other cable TV systems of large and growing importance, those of Murdoch, Turner, Cox, General Corporation, Taft, Storer, and Group W, Westinghouse. Many of these systems are prominent in more than one field and are only arbitrarily placed in a particular category. Time Incorporated is very important in cable as well as magazines. McGraw-Hill is a major publisher of magazines. The Tribune Company has become a large force in television as well as newspapers. Hearst is important in magazines as well as newspapers, and Murdoch has significant newspaper interests as well as television and movie holdings. These 24 companies are large, profit-seeking corporations owned and controlled by quite wealthy people. It can be seen in Table 1-1 that all but one of the top companies for whom data are available have assets in excess of $1 billion, and the median size is $2.6 billion. It can also be seen in the table that approximately 3/4 of these media giants had after-tax profits in excess of $100 million, with the median at $183 million. Many of the large media companies are fully integrated into the market. And for the others too, pressures of stockholders, directors, and bankers to focus on the bottom line are powerful. These pressures have intensified in recent years as media stocks have become market favorites and actual or prospective owners of newspapers and television properties have found it impossible to capitalize increased audience size and advertising revenues into multiplied values of the media franchise and great wealth. This has encouraged the entry of speculators and increased the pressure and temptation to focus more intensively on profitability. Family owners have been increasingly divided between those wanting to take advantage of the new opportunities and those desiring a continuation of family control. And their splits have often precipitated crises, leading finally to the sale of the family interest. This trend towards greater integration of the media into the market system has been accelerated by the loosening of rules limiting media concentration, cross-ownership, and control by non-media companies. There has also been an abandonment of restrictions, previously quite feeble anyway, on radio, TV commercials. Entertainment, mayhem programming, and fairness doctrine threats, opening the door to the unrestrained commercial use of the airwaves. The greater profitability of the media in a deregulated environment has also led to an increase in takeovers and takeover threats with even giants like CBS and Time. Directly attacked or threatened, this has forced the managements of the media giants to incur greater debt and to focus ever more aggressively and unequivocally on profitability in order to placate owners and reduce the attractiveness of their properties to outsiders. They have lost some of their limited autonomy to bankers, institutional investors, and large individual investors, whom they have had to solicit as potential white knights. While the stock of their great majority of large media firms is traded on the securities market, approximately 2/3 of these companies are either closely held or still controlled by members of the originating family who retain large blocks of stock. This situation is changing as family ownership becomes diffused among larger numbers of heirs and the market opportunities for selling media properties continue to improve. But the persistence of family control is evident in the data shown in Table 1-2. Also evident in the table is the enormous wealth possessed by the controlling families of the top media firms. For 7 of the 24, the market value of the media properties owned by controlling families in the mid-1980s exceeded $1 billion, and the median value was close to $500 million. These control groups obviously have a special stake in the status quo by virtue of their wealth and their strategic position in one of the great institutions of society. And they exercise the power of this strategic position, if only by establishing the general aims of the company and choosing its top management.
You did what tonight?
Ohio, Dennis Kucinich for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor Walker, you said the union leaders agreed to the financial cuts, but then you blamed the local unions for not following through on these pledges. That's because you refused to drop your demand to strip workers of collective bargaining rights that had nothing to do with the budget. and refused to negotiate and rejected the union's offer. Now, Governor Walker, if the unions in Wisconsin agreed to the financial cuts you sought, I don't understand how this can continue to be characterized as a debate about state budget deficits. This is supposed to be a hearing about state municipal debt. I don't understand how repealing collective bargaining rights for public workers shows us anything about state debt. Let me ask you about some of the specific provisions in your proposal to strip collective bargaining rights. First, your proposal would require unions to hold annual votes to continue representing their own members. Can you please explain to me and members of this committee how much money this provision saves for your state budget?
That and a number of other provisions we put in, because if you're going to ask, if you're going to put in place a change like that, we wanted to make sure that we protected the workers of our state so that they had a right to know what kind of value they got out of it. It's the same reason we gave workers the right to choose, which is a fundamental American right, the right to choose whether or not they want to be a part of a union and whether or not they went up to $1,000.
How much money does it save, Governor? Just answer
that particular part doesn't save any.
Okay,
that's right. In the same way that
that's
if you,
the point. It
if you read the
obviously
federal
has
budget,
no effect whatsoever.
I'll answer your
I'm
question.
reclaiming my time. It obviously had no effect whatsoever on the state budget. I want to ask about another one of your proposals. Under your plan, you would prohibit employees from paying union member dues from their paychecks. How much money would this provision save your state budget?
It would save employees up to $1,000 per year they could use to pay for their pension and their health care contributions.
Governor, it wouldn't save anything. There are minor administrative costs, if any. It's obvious what the real intent is here. And
It's to give workers a right. It's to give the workers the right to choose.
I'll back it up. Mr. Chairman, right here from the state of Wisconsin's Legislative Fiscal Bureau, this is a nonpartisan state budget agency, much like the Congressional Budget Office. The Bureau was asked to identify provisions in the governor's bill that are non-fiscal policy items that have no state fiscal effect. This letter confirms the obvious, that Governor Walker's effort to repeal the rights of state workers is a non-fiscal policy item. No effect on the state budget shortfall. I ask unanimous consent that this letter be included in the record.
Reserving the right, we'll inspect it and plan to include it in the record.
That's unusual. You would reserve the right to object.
The gentleman will suspend. Hold the time. We fully expect to include it in the record. Because it's not a publication that is widely distributed, we simply would like to receive it, and as soon as it's been quickly vetted during this hearing, it'll be accepted. That's a consistent policy from both sides.
I'd like to respond. In the 14 years that I've been on this committee, I've never had a chairman reserve the right to object to putting an official document in the record that was central to the purpose of this hearing, determining whether or not you stripping collective bargaining rights, Governor, is a financial issue or not. It's not. It's a political issue. That's what I'm proving.
The gentleman is incorrect. Chairman Waxman did it repeatedly. In most cases, just as here, by the end of the hearing, items which were not part of widely distributed documents were accepted. I expect to do the same, and I would work with the gentleman to get it done before the end of the hearing. The gentleman may continue.
Well, I've just made it a matter of public record anyway. The title of this hearing is Choice or Necessity. I think that what we've been able to demonstrate here is that the attack on collective bargaining rights is a choice, not a budget issue. There are budget issues as well that need to be addressed in Wisconsin. For example, according to the National Nurses United in U.S. states facing a budget shortfall, revenues from corporate taxes have declined $2.5 billion in the last year. In Wisconsin, 2/3 of corporations pay no taxes, and the share of state revenue from corporate taxes has fallen by half since 1981. That's published in The Nation by John Nickel. I won't ask to submit it by unanimous consent. And also, in the Real News Network, they have a report here that points out that the budget shortfall of $137 million in Wisconsin could have been covered if the state had just kept going its state legislated estate taxes, which they let expire after 2008. Also points out that if they had gone on to collect the estate taxes from their wealthiest citizens, they could have paid down the debt. Now, I just want to say in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, that we really are here at the center of a great debate over the purpose of government, whether there is such a thing as a public sphere with public servants who perform duties on behalf of the public using resources that belong to the public, or is government going to be auctioned off to the highest bidder, to corporations who privatize and inevitably drive up the cost of government, drive up the cost of services, drive up taxes? That's where this debate is headed nationally. I think that Governor Walker has inadvertently done a public service by exposing the extent to which this mindset of privatizing what is the public sphere, bringing this issue to the forefront. So thank you for being here, both governors.
You were just listening to a debate. That was Dennis Kucinich, Democrat, speaking over the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. Continuing with another article from the May 24th, May 30th edition of the Shepherd Express. Why recall Scott Walker? His job creation claims are not credible. By Lisa Kaiser. Last week, Governor Scott Walker rushed out new unverified employment data showing the good news that the state added 23,321 jobs in 2011, or less than 1% of the 2.7 million jobs in Wisconsin. But Walker's good news of barely perceptible job growth in 2011 contrasts with other employment data that was submitted by the Walker administration and vetted by the U.S. Department of Labor. That verified data showed that Wisconsin That verified data showed that Wisconsin under Walker was dead last in job creation in 2011, with a loss of 33,900 jobs. In fact, just a day after Walker's big job announcement, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics released data submitted by the Walker administration, then vetted by the federal government, showing Walker's Wisconsin continues to lose jobs, with 6,200 private sector jobs lost in April 2012. Wisconsin was one of only 7 states to lose non-farm jobs over the past year. That said, the BLS figures show that Walker did create some jobs in April, 500 new jobs in state government. But the added government jobs were offset by heavy losses in the private sector. More than 205,000 people in Wisconsin were unemployed in April. Walker had promised to create 250,000 private sector jobs in his first term, an average of 62,500 jobs per year. Even taking Walker at his word, he's helped to create less than half of the jobs he had promised to create in 2011. Early release to prop up recall campaign. Walker took the unprecedented step of releasing his more favorable job data before it was vetted by the U.S. Department of Labor, which will release the corrected numbers on June 28th, 3 weeks after the Walker's June 5th recall election. Walker's data came from the quarterly census of employment and wages, which is collected from about 95% of the state's employers. Each state collects this data, then sends it to the federal government, which verifies it before releasing the data for every state. In this way, states can compare job growth or shrinkage, since they're all looking at the same data pool. Since the BLS won't release the verified data for all 50 states until June 28th, after Walker's recall election, there's no way of knowing how Walker's claim of 23,000 new jobs holds up to the other states' employment trends. But that didn't stop Walker's campaign from airing new ads in support of Walker's job creation prowess right after the Department of Workforce Development Secretary Reggie Newton released them publicly. Since the ads aired so quickly, the Democratic Party of Wisconsin filed a complaint with the State Government Accountability Board, alleging that Walker's campaign ads were the product of illegal coordination between the state government and Walker's campaign. There is no way that Walker and the Walker campaign could have produced an ad without knowing the numbers from Newsom ahead of time. The complaint states it is clear that Walker and the Walker campaign consulted with the state agency in order to craft a political message intended to support Walker's campaign. Newsom told a reporter that the DWD had not coordinated with Walker or his campaign. On Friday, State Representative John Richards, Democrat from Milwaukee, sent an open records request to Walker asking for a breakdown of where jobs were added, whether the jobs were private sector or government jobs, and the industries that showed job growth. Richards wrote in his letter, failing to do so should be viewed as nothing other than an admission that your job numbers are not based on solid, verifiable data that can withstand reasonable public scrutiny. Anemic. The quarterly census of employment and wages isn't the only way to look at employment trends, of course. Each month, the BLS releases employment figures based on surveys of 3.5 to 5% of the state's employers. Those are the figures that, when compared to other states' job data, ranks Walker's Wisconsin dead last in job creation in the past year, with 21,400 jobs lost between April 2011 and April 2012. Not surprisingly, Walker is challenging those gloomy figures. He's being aided by the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, which has bought Walker's argument that the standard BLS numbers are disputed and controversial. Another way to view the state's employment picture is through the local area unemployment statistic, which draws from surveys of households. That survey shows that the employment rate has dropped in the past year, including 0.1% in April from 6.8 to 6.7%. James Peoples, economics professor at UW-Milwaukee, said that the disparity in job data could be due to what kinds of information is collected by the surveys and payroll reports. For example, Peoples said that employer data released by the Walker administration indicates the number of jobs in the state. It doesn't indicate how many jobs are part-time or how many people hold more than one job or are entrepreneurs. I really think, to get it right, one would have to take months of digging into the data, Peoples said, and by then you're into another month of data. Andrew Reschovsky, professor of public affairs and applied economics at UW-Madison's La Follette School of Public Affairs, said even if Walker's data holds up to scrutiny, Wisconsin's job growth is anemic. Reschovsky said he doubted Wisconsin would achieve Walker's goal of 250,000 new jobs within 4 years. It's hard at this point to believe that we could have such accelerated job growth, Reschovsky said.
Yes. Hi. Hello, how are you? Elmo? What's up? Did you call me?
Thank you.